Hello and welcome back. Hope you had a good break. So now we have a working group together, Farnas and I. We want to discuss actually research ethics, continuing the theme of the previous presentation. We want to discuss the different ethical aspects in software research and also mainly what sort of ethical aspects should we report in our publications, in our manuscripts. So a little bit of background about software research specifically. Software research, engineering research is applied research. So most often we employ human subjects such as students and practitioners. And when both these subjects are considered as vulnerable subjects that are subject to exploitation, for example, students by teachers, employees by managers, and there could be potential harm for harm of participation could be loss of reputation or cohesion. It is important to not only state that a consent was obtained, like a templated statement, we made sure that we communicated to the practitioners, but also or the subjects, but also report how the consent was obtained, how the information was shared to the subjects, because this can have implication on the quality of answers the subjects might give. They might give more honest and truthful answers if they are made sure that the harm of participation is minimized, and also the value that they would get from participating in the research, thereby directly affecting the scientific value of the results. So we looked at what the journals or publishers say about this, how much should be reported. There are concrete guidelines. Actually, when you look at Springer guidelines, they require us to talk or discuss about ethical aspects, and they have even listed the different names of the sections where we should mention these. And here you can see I have highlighted a sentence in blue that we should include a statement of this effect, meaning the informed consent. It should appear in the manuscript. And what was interesting to see also was that they even ask us to comment on things that are not applicable. If, for example, obtaining consent was not applicable to your study, then we should mention that it was not applicable and why. See, as you can see, it's quite detailed in how we should report ethical considerations. Here, I would just like to give a brief of three of the ethical aspects. They're mostly related to each other, but mainly informed consent. It's the way we inform our subjects on the purpose of the study, who will access the raw data, what are the risks and benefits of participation, and so on. And also anonymity. How do we ensure that we are not collecting anything that can be traced back to them? And details about confidentiality, who will access the data, how we will present the data, for example, aggregated results rather than individual responses, and so on. So we actually did a small study to find out how much of ethical aspects are actually reported in software engineering journals. We basically chose journals because they have not as tight space limitation as conference papers. So we looked at four main journals: IST, TSE, Empirical Software Engineering, and JSS. And we looked at the latest issues just to know the most recent state of practice. And here's a snapshot of what we found. As you can see, we have divided the reporting into three aspects that I mentioned before. And also the blue graph is the number of papers that have not reported any details. And then you can see some of the papers have reported informed consent, some others confidentiality, and a few of them have mentioned anonymity. Then what we found in our study of 100 papers was that only about 36 papers have mentioned at least one aspect of ethical aspects. Then we also look at detail into what has been reported in individual papers. Here you can see that even though the papers have mentioned some ethical aspects, it's more often just discussing one of the topic. For example, blue is informed consent and green is details about anonymity. You can see that only a handful of papers have discussed all three aspects. But what we also saw that the amount of details that were reported in these papers differed a lot. For example, we looked more closely into confidentiality and informed consent, because they have different aspects to them. Informed consent means explanation of the procedure, risk, benefit, voluntariness. So how many of these aspects were actually discussed in the papers? Again, what we see is that total of 28 papers have mentioned some details about the papers, and 9 of the papers have not mentioned any details, only a statement that we have obtained informed consent. And only a few papers, like we see, we have identifiers for the papers so that they are not traceable. But you can see only one paper actually discussed 4 of the aspects. There are still some aspects missing in that. For example, risk is not discussed in that paper. And at most, just one of the aspect was discussed. And when it comes to informed consent, the most common aspect was about the study purpose. They have described how they communicated the study purpose to the subjects. Then also confidentiality refers to multiple aspects, such as how do we store the data, how do we analyze the data, and finally, how do we share the data? And also details on what data has been kept confidentiality and what has not been kept confidential. Also, we looked at the papers. Again, we see that out of the papers that have reported some details about confidentiality, only one of the aspect in confidentiality has been discussed at most, and we have a few outliers where there is detailed information about all the aspects of confidentiality. And even though I think 1 or 2 aspects are still missing from the paper that has reported the most. So as we see here, what we want to actually emphasize here is that the inconsistency. Most papers have not reported anything about how they address the ethical aspects. Some have reported, but the way they have reported is quite inconsistent. Some have reported very few details, and some have actually reported quite a lot of details. And also, when we compare the papers, it's not the same paper. For example, here, IST 14 is the one that has most discussed aspects. But when you see informed consent, you see some other aspect, other paper, in this case, ESE 26. So when we compare them as a whole, then we will see that many articles actually, even though focus a lot on one aspect, they're still missing out on many other aspects of ethical considerations. So really, I want to put forward this question now that I would like to discuss is how much should we discuss ethical aspects in our papers? Should it be just for the sake of it? For example, your university's ethical board requires you to, or an editor, a journal publisher requires you to mention it. So just for the sake of it, or do you think actually elaborating on the process adds more reliability, accountability, or trust of the scientific or the scientific value of the results? For example, if the students were actually made sure that there is no harm, that the teachers would not know what the answers students submit, maybe the students actually provide truthful answers there. Also, in case of practice, if the managers are not forcing the employees to participate in the study, then we might actually get more truthful answers from there. So that is what I want us to discuss. And we have prepared a questionnaire. I think Farnaz will share the link to the questionnaire. It's a Mentimeter questionnaire. And we would like you to rate where you would like to see, how much of these ethical aspects you would like to see reported in your manuscripts. And then based on your responses, we would like you to join certain breakout rooms. We will also put the link to the breakout rooms. For example, if you're towards reporting a lot of details, then you can join the group room related to report details. If you are leaning towards skipping the details because they don't add too much value, then you can choose the skip values. But please only join the breakout rooms after you have filled the survey on Mentimeter. So I guess we are live now. Thank you so much for participating in the breakout rooms. I was in the breakout room which was related to skipping details, and there were two people. I was afraid there would be no one, but it was really nice to get the view for not reporting as much. And maybe Sanaz and I, we could summarize what we discussed. Um, Probably I can start with why it's not as important. Firstly, I think all the participants agree that it's not a strict yes or no here, and also it depends a lot. It depends on what the research topic is, what the research area is. If it is something, I mean, there are two aspects, research ethics and also the other ethics, which is more broader, which is related to bias and many other things that we have been listening to throughout the day today. So ethics as such is quite broad, and this might mean research ethics might be too limiting, and discussing a lot on that may not actually add any value and may take away from the other aspects that actually deserve to be discussed more, depending on the type of the research study. And also another reason why it is not important to report everything is because could be, it could become more bureaucratic, that doing it just for the sake of it and without adding any value. So in conclusion, I think if I'm concluding it in a better way, I mean in the way that we discussed, it's not a clear no, but we should select what is important uh, to report and what is not. So that was what we discussed. I don't know Farnas, if you want to share the results or summarize also what your group discussed, because I think I could see that there were many more in your group.
Yes. Yeah, actually, we discussed that we had several discussions that it would be very important. Do you see my screen at the moment?
I don't. Maybe someone in the chat can confirm if they can see. I am not seeing your screen, Farnas.
Okay. Okay, then let me first explain that what we discussed. Actually, we discussed that it would be interesting to have details of the research and details of ethical details, and because anyhow, actually, even for a reviewer, it's very important to know about these details. And one of the suggestions that also confirmed here was about having the supplementary, maybe a piece of paper, supplementary ethical piece that can be attached to a paper, and for sure depends on the permission and confirmation and of program committee. So it would be good for software engineering committee to have such kind of details, because then it helps for clarification to understand what happened regarding these ethical things. And on the other hand, one discussion that was that it's not just a matter of having some rules. It would be also interesting to have some rationale behind things, and this rationale is also very important. Example that we had was on healthcare, that these things are very important, that we need to look at that in the healthcare, and have perhaps more details in the healthcare paper, because they are more sensitive. Yes. Yeah, I think we had quite, we were somehow agree on reporting the details. And yes, finally, it's very important that we we report such details.
This is the right link, Farnas, to the response. It looks like, although we had two groups, but it seems like many are in the middle somehow. Or is this not the right one that I'm looking at?
Yeah, actually, I can check it, but
yeah.
Yes. But what I can see from the results is that what we saw, actually, most people were agree in the Mentimeter link that we can have we need to have the details. And when I'm looking at the figure that I have, almost we had 12 participants, and almost the rate of each aspect that we had it is like 25. It means that at least 8 or 9 people were completely agree with what should be reported there.
We can see that voluntariness was rated the most out of all the different aspects.
Yes.
Feel free to comment in the chat. Do you was this something expected? Did you expect to see this response, or and maybe are you disappointed to see this much reporting, or are you happy to see that there is some value of reporting? I guess it's not surprising for me to see that voluntariness has the most importance, because I think that's the most important aspect of ethics that has implications on the scientific value. If the participation is voluntary, then the responses are more honest, I would say, and thereby having more value and increasing the accountability and trust of the results. Okay, I think then this was the task that we want to discuss in the working group. We still have some more minutes remaining, so if anyone wants to comment on this, please feel free to do so. But maybe we can walk them through the remaining part, Farnaz.
Yes. Do you see my screen regarding the importance of ethical aspects?
No, actually, it's still my screen that is being shared.
Okay.
We have a comment saying straightforward, no, that we are not giving importance to ethical aspects needs courage. That is true. Yeah. No, I mean, this is also another thing that everyone would say, it's, yeah, good to have, but how much of it will we implement in our research ourselves? I mean, I would be questioning myself also if I choose to dedicate this description in my manuscript, or would I focus on other things that probably help the paper to even get accepted. Yeah, this is another aspect. Like, we all think it would be important, but how much of it we would actually implement in practice? Good point. I don't know why, Farnaz, that we are not able to see your screen. But we have a panel discussion now in just about a minute, if I'm not wrong. Yes, there's no break, right? Yeah, now we see your screen.
Okay. So I don't know what happens then.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the aspects relevant to reporting the process, how study purpose statement is communicated. You see that it's one of the highest, and also report how voluntariness is ensured, an explanation of the subject's right to refuse without penalty. But then the other aspects that we mentioned is also similar, has also similar rate. Like report the process, how risks and benefits are communicated, report how the data and subjects are anonymized, and report how the data is shared to protect confidentiality, report how data is stored, and actually report how analysis conducted while protecting confidentiality.
We are done.